Good morning, everybody, and then good afternoon as well. Good evening to all of you looking at us. I trust you're doing well. And today we're going to talk about solar, solar. Lots of us like solar, right? We love solar. Solar, we've seen the price dropping for the last decade by about 80%, 80. We know also that solar is one of the cheapest form of energy generation these days, right? And solar is meant to replace fossil fuel, right? So that's what we know. Which fossil fuel? That's the question we need to respond. Is it coal that's particularly dirty or gas that some are seen as a transitional fuel? That's the question I want us to replace. But if you're just joining right now and it's the first time that you're watching Renewables in Africa channel, I want you to know that we are here to demystify renewable energy for you, right? If you are a professional and you're thinking you want to jump into the sector, in here you will find all the information you need. But you also an investor and you think that you want to invest into the sector, but you're missing some information that could be crucial. I'm saying again, you find all the information that you need. And I'm actually can tell you today, I have a specific special tool that you want to be watching out for. So I keep the surprise for you, right? As we're going along. And if you're a business and you're thinking that, hey, I like to make sure that I can become a green company because I don't want to leave my competitor, take the advantage on this terrain. Again, in here, you find all the information you need. And my name is Tony Chiu, and I'm your clean energy champion. Okay, now let's come back to the topic of our conversation today. And the title is asking, so what is the choice that we should be making when we're using solar? Should we be using solar to replace coal that we all understand is the dirtiest of the dirtiest of the fossil fuel that are being used at the moment, or should we be looking at gas that is becoming quite costly, especially in light of recent event over the last couple of months? But what we do not know actually is this situation is not new. This is a question that we've been asking ourselves for at least the last 18 months precisely, right? Or at least a good 12 months. And that's what I want us to discuss and to have a proper understanding of it and look at whether or not we should be going to using solar to replace coal or using solar to replace gas. And as usual, to sort of inform our discussion, what I prepared for you, it's a small set of slides that I like to go through. And I'm just going to show you what has been observed. Today, the conversation is going to be focusing a lot more on the European continent, right? Because I guess that's the one that is quite, I would say, in front in terms of the current situation. That's where the energy crisis is sort of exacerbated. So let me share with you the screen that I have prepared. But before I do that, I was going to forget. So if you like what we're doing, please do us a favor. Make sure that you come and you leave a comment because we love seeing your comment. We love responding to your comment. And we love seeing you proactive. But also make sure that you share the video, right? To some people who do not know yet that we're having those live because this is the one we're doing on a Wednesday, but we're doing it on a Wednesday, but also on a Sunday for you to know. On a Wednesday at 6 p.m. BST time, and on a Sunday normally it's 2:30 BST time. Okay, that's great. So I'm counting on you to leave your message. But let's go back to what I was going to show you. I was going to share my presentation with you. So if you give me a second, I found it and I can go through that and highlight to you. So where is that beautiful presentation? So I want to look at the window. What is it? What is it? Okay, I think I know what it is. I think I can see that. That's the one. Okay, that's the presentation. So basically, the reason I'm asking the question is because what we have been seeing, looking at the situation in Europe recently, is that if we're looking at the situation between 2011, right, and 2019, we've seen that in terms of the annual average of electricity generation in terawatt hour, right, between 2011 and 2019, so almost a decade there, clearly we had a lot of renewables that were kind of replacing coal, right? So that was the narrative this day, and everybody was kind of used to that, right? Very comfortable with that. So what happened is, obviously, between 2019 and 2021, Yes, we have had the pandemic, we have had the global supply chain issues, and all of a sudden as well, we've started seeing as well that gas pricing all of a sudden becoming more and more expensive. And guess what? Because it was quite expensive, so renewable tend to been used now, have been used now to replace a lot more gas rather than coal. And that's a situation that we don't usually realize. That's what obviously we were saying that all of a sudden renewables replacing costly gas, but not necessarily dirty coal. So if we look at that a little bit deeper, right, we could see that looking still at those analyses. By the way, for me, just to say that all those fantastic graphs is coming from a company called platform called Amber that I discovered not long ago, and it's a fantastic one. And obviously, I'm showing the picture that they're showing, and what we could see is that the fossil fuel fell across the 27 nation of the EU, right? So, but in 20 from 2019 and 2011, if you look at coal, we almost have some kind of plateau here, right? So that means that the EU was progressively phasing out the coal, but clearly there has been a plateau that was held by the fact that all of a sudden, if you look on the other side, gas was becoming more expensive. And as gas was becoming expensive, they were looking at renewable not to replace the coal, but more the fossil fuel, right? Sorry, not the coal, but the gas instead. That's what I wanted to say instead. And exactly, if we're looking at the graph, looking at the showing us the price volatility, right? The price volatility, and we can see as well in yellow here, you have the gas price. You can see the big spike that we observe, right? That was around December 2021. Everybody remember that. Obviously, with the winter coming, all of a sudden it became very, very expensive, and everybody was crying. Right, it's come down since then, but still relatively high compared to what it used to be a few years ago. And that translates immediately into the cost of electricity. So yeah, if we just stop sharing for a second, I just want to come back and say, this is what we actually observe. That's why I always like people to remember that, as we're talking about the renewable energy sector, this is not a sector that is actually evolving in isolation. This is a sector that is part of the global energy sector. So that means it is competing, especially if we're talking about solar and wind. Not only is it competing already with the other sources of energy, renewable energy sources, right? But you're also competing, obviously, with the other fossil fuel. And if you're looking at business people, it's all about two things. It's all about, mitigating your costs and sort of improving your margin. So if you look at those kind of equation, all of a sudden they'll be looking the cheapest fuel, which is renewable, to phase out what is the costly or the most expensive fuel at the moment. So that means if it's coal, that's what they're gonna replace. That's what it's gonna replace at the time. But if it happened that the most expensive is gas, they're gonna go to gas. So that's the reality of the economy. It's not always great to see, but it's important to realize it. Let me go back to my screen and carry on sharing, because I didn't finish what I was sharing. I wanted to go and continue. So what we wanted to see, and in fact, it happened around the second half of 2021, right? If you look at this graph, what you have in green, the green is the generation by renewables. And if you see below the line, the dark, the black correspond to coal. So that's what you see from June, right? Going forward, you have a good 4 months there where we have a lot more renewables, right? Maybe except September, we have a lot more renewables, but that renewables was actually replacing gas as opposed to replacing coal. So that's the situation that we were saying, that all of a sudden, we had renewables replacing gas instead of replacing coal. And I'm sure this is not something that we definitely wanted at the time. So, and this is the kind of situation that we're gonna have. So that's the let me just stop sharing again. So that is the Cornelian choice, yeah, that that we're seeing. So, and I have my colleague that you're gonna see in a minute that is actually so saying that coal is already being phased out globally. Yeah, that's true. So in I would say in theory what should happen, but still a lot of countries don't necessarily do that. But what we've been seeing in Europe for the second half of 2021, obviously, the renewables was phasing more gas, not because of the emission level that is particularly high for gas. Not it's quite the opposite. Coal is definitely the dirtiest, right? But it's simply for the economic the economic reasons. That's what was happening, and I've already made a live around that, talking about the over reliance of EU on Russian gas, and you obviously know by now that the IEA came up with a 10-point plan to reduce the reliance of Europe into the Russian gas. And one thing that I've read that was very interesting. That's what I want to share. I want to share that. If I look at this plan, so it's talking about, because that's something that everybody could see. So we're talking about here the 10-point plan that the IEA has put together to reduce the reliance of Europe into Russian gas. If you look at the number four, they're talking about an acceleration of wind and solar deployment. So in a nutshell, they're talking about adding an additional 20 terawatt hour on top of what was already there. And they're also talking about using a set of tools and also initiatives to make it happen. And one of those initiatives or tool that they want to use is digital application, which is actually extremely interesting to see, and you would understand why, because I have a gentleman here that you saw the last time who also going to be sharing something I want to show you. But the last slide I wanted to show is this one. Yeah. So the IEA is talking about an acceleration of wind and solar. But what you need to know is that acceleration was already was already going on, right? That for if you look at the graph over the last 20 years, you can see that progressively we started with wind, but all of a sudden solar also picked up to get to the point where it is right now. And compared to what the IEA is saying, looking at the level that we had, 350 gigawatt of wind and solar built in 2021, 2022, the idea is to bring in another 15% on top of that, which corresponds to 20 terawatt hour of wind, but also solar. So we're gonna need a huge amount of solar, and it's gonna be a huge amount of solar that is deployed here. So I'm showing the same thing, but in terms of a terawatt hour. So now the question we want to ask to ourselves, right? Let me just stop sharing and come back to you here. The question we then want to ask to ourselves, right? It's how is all of this going to be possible, right? So they talked about digital application, and I wanted just to bring on my colleague that I've introduced to you some time ago, last week. It is Coffee. Coffee, you also an expert like me into renewables energy, so you have a brilliant career as a developer, and I've seen that the IEA is talking about accelerating solar and wind. But let's talk about solar, because that's the one thing I want to focus on for today. Right, as I was talking about the Cornelian choice that we're facing between dirty coal and costly gas. But before you actually, I was going to talk about digital application, because you've designed one PV data that we talked about already, and I wanted to see how this PV data could potentially tap into this opportunity that is opening, right, to bringing a lot more solar into Europe. But before you do that, I was wondering whether you can give us a bit about give it a bit of your opinion around this question. So, what do you think solar should be replacing, coal or gas? Because as I was talking, I could see you were texting me and you were buzzing, sharing me some information. I don't know whether you can share that before we can look at into PV data a little bit.
Sure. I mean, Tony, I mean, it's a pleasure being on here. Obviously, another time this week. I do appreciate it. I do love and appreciate your channel and your feed. I mean, just a quick answer to the question: what is solar going to actually replace? Basically, solar and wind combined. Obviously, I know we're focusing on solar today, But I just want to add both of them together because both solar and wind are actually poised to actually dominate the global electricity sector. They are eventually going to replace obviously coal as an energy source is already being phased out, and obviously the last COP26 held last year had a number of countries coming out to pledging to actually phase out the entire coal fleet, which is also very very good. For the emissions world, is very very good for us to actually meet our net zero target a lot quicker. And now the next one is now phasing out natural gas. So just answer your question, basically, solar energy and wind energy, both renewable energy sources will actually dominate the global electricity market. Yes, you have a couple of other energy sources like hydrogen playing somewhat of a marginal role depending on what the situation is. But what I expect is for solar and for wind to actually dominate the industry. Now, what does that mean in essence? It means that there's going to be a lot more added capacity onto the grid system for renewable energy solar. There's going to be a lot more demand for renewable energy solar. There's going to be a lot more investment for renewable energy solar. I should actually mentioned earlier, I mean, the cost for solar right now, they're actually on record low numbers. So, I mean, what we expect in the next 5 to 10 years, they're actually going to go even further down, making it a very, very cheap energy source and a very, very sensible and financially feasible from an investor's point of view. Now, because you have a lot of new solar coming online, what that means is that from a development standpoint, you need to ensure that the early phase planning, the early stage development, they're done as quickly as possible so these new solar infrastructures can actually be installed and come online quite quickly. And that's why, obviously, like you mentioned, the IEA and other leading organizations as well have actually encouraged for the push of more digital tools to help streamline this process, to help enable decision makers, investors, solar developers to have a ready to go to that can basically answer all the information that they need right there and then. I do have a prior background as a solar developer, and I developed project in sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the challenges that I faced as a developer many years ago was that it just takes way too long to get all the information I need. It takes way too long to decide, okay, how feasible is my social economic risk? What is my profitability going to be? What is the climate? What is the political situation in the country that I want to locate my project in? I mean, keep in mind, my focus was sub-Saharan Africa, and sometimes, obviously, depending on how large the project is, that process may take a couple of weeks. For some project in excess of, let's say, 10, 50, 100 megawatts, it takes a couple of months. I mean, there's a project that actually took basically 12 to 14 months. This is over a year, just that initial planning stage. So I thought to myself, if you had a tool that answered all those key question about what is the financial output going to be, what are the financial implications, what are the financial risks, what are the technical parameters, technical risks, what are the social and environmental risks that my project will encounter throughout its entire life cycle. But I don't want that tool to give me that information in a couple of months. I want that information now. Because if I have that information now, it will make my decision making a lot quicker. And it will make me, if for example, let's say I want to locate a project and let's just put a random country, let's say Portugal, for example. And let's say my project is going to be exposed, let's say flood risk. Uh, you know, in a regular scenario, while you're developing project, you need to go through an EIA assessment. Okay, once you've done your technical, financial, you go through an EIA assessment. That process takes a long time. Okay,
A lot
but
of money.
and it takes a long time, and it does cost quite a lot of money. So you spend all that time and spend all that money, and they'll tell you like, hey, look, I mean, your project is going to be exposed to this level of potential flood risk during a 10 or 20-year life cycle. Now, I want a tool that can tell me that, give me that information in seconds. Okay, basically costing a penny to the dollar. And that's what we've created at PV Data. PV Data is, I'll say, a world-renowned solar finance, but also environmental tool that enables users to measure the financial bankability of their solar energy investment and also the sustainability of that particular asset anywhere in the world. It's extremely dynamic. We cover about 96 countries, over 100,000 unique locations, cities, town, villages, whatever you have. And obviously, in terms of the type of structure, we do try to incorporate every possible structure right now that is used in the market today. So yeah, so that's actually what I'm here to present to you
Okay.
today, just to show you some features of the platform, because I know that we don't have much
Yeah.
time today. So just to highlight a little bit, what is this
Yeah.
platform? What type
Yeah.
of output can you get from this platform? And obviously, I'm more than happy to schedule a more detailed session to go through the usability of the platform in more detail. So
No problem. I think you've highlighted that. I think should I share that? Because I think I can see that you share the screen with me.
yes, you
So
can
let
go ahead
me,
and
yeah, I
actually
think that's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
okay, perfect. So yeah, so like I said, so we are PV Data. You can access us at pvdata.io. Our
Okay.
tool is basically free to download, so I encourage anybody in the industry, whether you are a developer, whether you're an investor, whether you're a solar analyst, this tool is going to make your job a lot easier. And like I said, it's extremely free to actually download and actually use the tool. Obviously, we put you through a trial process, and if this is something that you feel that is right for you and your business, then you can go ahead and actually obviously select a package that's right for you. But with that being said, once you have downloaded the platform, it's a very, very, how it's built is a very, very simple platform to use. And obviously, since Tony mentioned earlier, want to focus on Europe, let's just do a very, very quick project analysis for a project in, let's say, Lisbon, Portugal. And I just want to highlight the type of outputs that you can actually get from using the PV Data platform. Obviously, I'm going to make this process quite quick, but like I said, we can
Yeah.
schedule a much more detailed session to really, really go through each parameter of the platform. So we said Lisbon, Portugal. You just scroll down, you look for the country of choice, Portugal. There we go.
Yeah.
We select the location, Lisbon. Just put Lisbon Solar. PPA provider, just one major PPA. I want the analysis to be structured in euros, mentioned a 50 megawatt project, and I'm just gonna just breeze through these other parameters, like I said, because of the time. Let me just make the project a little bit cheaper. Start with this, yeah. And the interest rate probably 5%. Okay.
So you essentially have all those toggle buttons that can help us to accelerate that, right?
Correct. So I mean, so this toggle button, normally once you've gone through the initial registration, the
Yeah.
platform asks you to key in certain default values that are basically prevalent and common with the project you normally structure. So when you're filling out the main form, you
You're
don't have
running
to
out of
go
fun.
through every single parameter. You can just say, look, I just want you to use my user default. Obviously, you can go back to your settings and you can adjust your default, or you can actually change your default directly on the information page. So we've keyed in all our analysis, and like I said, okay, the PV Data platform was built for simplicity, but also we built it to actually give you that quick, detailed information, industry-ready information. So
Mm.
this is the first report that is generated. This is our detailed due diligence report. The PV Data platform actually generates two separate reports. One is our diligence reports, due diligence reports, and the other one is our financial cash flow structure of this particular project. But I'm just going to go through very briefly on the due diligence report. Now, as a solar developer or as a solar analyst, one of the key questions that one of the key outputs that you're looking for when structuring a solar project is number one, okay, is this project going to be profitable?
Yeah.
What is the IRR of this project going to be? Okay, and what is the net present value? I mean, is this project giving me a positive net present value? Because if it's not, then that means the project is not going to be bankable. So those are the first line of outputs that any solar analyst or investor wants to know. Then the next line is, okay, what are the possible risk factors that this project will be exposed to? The location factor, the political risk factor. Is this project going to be exposed to a lot of risk, political risk, environmental risk, and social risk? We're going to go through all of them today. So in terms of this report, it gives you, what I call a nice key figures. Just this is basically a very brief summary of the financial type outputs derived from this project. This gives you information about the location and the user in question. Obviously, there's a table of contents of what the report actually covers. And then you can go into the main nitty-gritty. This gives you a nice, brief, detailed summary about the power markets in the country of choice. Lets you know as a developer or as an analyst or the common language being spoken, the population in that location. And this is a very nice detailed outlook of the power market today relative to renewable energy solar. So if you're a new time developer and you don't know too much about the market, this is a very useful tool just to get a quick information about whether that market makes sense for you or whether you want to move on to a more favorable market of choice. So on our actual information box on the software, these are basically our entry parameters, and it's just highlighted here, the information that we keyed in initially, the project size, the PPA price, the project cost, equity value, equity and debt value repayment type structure, and so on and so forth. But this is what we actually want to focus on, the financial output of the project. Okay, it's the NPV positive, which we can see that the NPV is actually net positive. What is the IRR for this project? Okay, this project is telling us that it's going to give us an IRR of 16.3%, which is a very healthy project. I mean, I just want to keep in mind, actually keyed in very favorable values for Portugal. Probably it might be difficult to actually get 16.3% IRR in Portugal today. It's probably going to be anywhere from about 7 to actually 10%. But obviously, like I said, because the software is very dynamic, you can play around with the numbers, you can change the numbers as you see fit. If you scroll further down, I really like this particular feature. This is a nice sensitivity analysis whereby we measure sensitivity on NPV and different parameters, so NPV and PPA price. The higher you move the PPA price, obviously the higher the NPV value is going to be. The lower the PPA price, the lower the NPV value is going to be. And this is basically that nice threshold analysis indicator that will help guide the user on how high or how low to actually put a PPA price. And from right here, we can see that it tells us that a positive NPV will be achieved at a PPA tariff of about basically 7p per kilowatt hours. So basically, if we go back to our analysis bar and we select a PPA below 7p, then basically the output is going to let us know that this project is not going to be bankable. I believe we put a PPA of 9p per kilowatt hour, so that is quite healthy for a PPA. So I mean, scrolling further down, I mean, I'm really just breezing through this report. It's an extremely long and extremely detailed report, like I said. But I also want to touch on the environmental risk factors. So we do cover a number of potential environmental and social risk factors based on the location, based on also your input parameters that you actually keyed in. So from what we keyed in, the software only identified one major risk factor, which I think this is something that developers and analysts will actually take into consideration. It lets us know that a project in Lisbon, Portugal, will be possibly exposed to a flood risk during its 20-year project life cycle. And if we read more on the information here, it lets us know what level of potential flood risk our project may be exposed to. Let us know this is going to be over 1,600 millimeters of possible flood by the end of 2022. And what I like about it as a feature is it also provides mitigation strategies to avoid the said risk if we still want to actually move on with that project in that same location. One of our mitigation strategies is giving us is that we could either locate our project to an area in Portugal where the flood risk is low, invest in sustainable drainage measures, raise the height of your solar mountain system and key electrical infrastructure above 5.5 feet. So this is very, very good mitigation strategies. If you actually decide to actually remain in that location, basically mitigation strategies to avoid the said risk so it doesn't completely damage your project. Obviously, this is a nice uh, uh, technical and design report, basically letting you know what your electricity yield is going to be, the losses that is going to be experienced on your PV module. So this is just general information that a potential user, an analyst, a solar developer will need to know to better assess and to better ascertain whether or not that project is actually suitable for them, it's bankable for them, and if it's a project they want to move forward with. And all this information that I just summarized, on average in the industry today, believe it or not, I mean, this takes a couple of weeks or sometimes even a couple of months, depending on the complexity of the actual solar project. But for right now, I mean, we've been chatting for less than 20 minutes, and I've already given you the key output, the key environmental risk output that a potential project is going to be exposed to. So as an investor, as an analyst, you can then from then on make a decision. Okay, I think this project does make sense for us. I want to focus on it a little bit more. Or no, this project just doesn't make any sense for us. We don't want to be exposed to any form of flood risk. That is too risky for our investors, too risky for our partners who want to stay clear of that project. So that is a very, very useful feature of the PV data platform. And Tony, I mean, if I'm fortunate, hopefully sometime we can schedule another session sometime next week. Maybe we can go over probably another feature of the software, or we can probably focus more on the input parameters and how users can basically structure project in basically any country covered under a software.
That's absolutely great because as I say, usually when you have policy being announced like that, saying that we want to bring in 20 terawatt hour of solar by the end of or let's say within the next 12 months, right? So that's good. The question is always, how do you implement it? How do you make it happen? Do we have already the tool to deliver such an objective? And that's the reason, obviously, usually what we're doing on the Wednesday slot, 'cause I think, as you know, we have the Sunday and the Wednesday. Wednesday, we like to sort of go have a look at the different tool initiative that can really help us to implement some of those solutions, just to say that, hey, tangibly, this is what we're talking about. So that's why I love what you've been able to say to show there. So in a quick word, basically, you were saying that clearly for you with such digital tool, this is how we actually can bring in, or maybe Europe can bring fast solar onto the grid, isn't it? That's what you're saying here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's digital tools are probably the only way that you can actually fast track this transition of solar, because obviously from the diagrams you actually presented earlier in this session, I mean, solar is going to more than double in just under 20, 30 years. So you can imagine the level of complexity to actually get that done. On average, solar investors, solar analysts, they're inundated with a lot of solar applications. Hey,
Yeah.
look, I have this project in Namibia. Hey, I have this project in Germany. Hey, I have this project in South Africa. On average, on literally, hundreds and hundreds of projects every single week. And it's going to be very, very hard for them to sift through which one is decent, which one is not decent in a reasonable amount of time. So tools like PV Data can actually help achieve your goals. Okay, sift through which project makes sense for you, and the project that don't make sense for you with the PV Data tool, you can also look at why it doesn't make sense, and you can probably advise the developer on what and what not to do to make their project more bankable. Because obviously, every developer wants to see their project go online. So it's obviously the duty of the PV Data tool to highlight what the potential setbacks of unbankable projects are. So obviously the developers or the sole analysts can actually go back to make changes to make the project more bankable.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Kofi, for this input. And definitely, as you mentioned, so we're going to talk to you again next week. Maybe look at other aspect of PV data because for me, I love those digital tools that can help fast track the deployment of solar, right? And that's why I wanted just to drill into that, just to show to people, this is how it is possible to make this change happen, right? To implement that. So once again, thank you for that. So we're coming towards the end of our session. But I just wanted to close just to sort of tackle the question that I've seen there, which is, solar clearly is facing a quite difficult choice at the moment, right? Because initially it was very easy to make a choice because we knew that coal was particularly very dirty, right? So lots of emissions and was the dirtiest of the fossil fuel sources. So it was obvious that solar was going to replace that. But in light of current situation, even before we get the Ukraine-Russia situation, you can see over the last 12 years, all of a sudden we've seen a big spike of gas prices, right? That was triggered by the situation in the Middle East. Obviously Europe and other countries was complaining that the supply wasn't enough, and hence obviously shooting up the price up. Whether or not it's true, again, I don't want to dive into that. This is not our role here to talk about the politics side. We're just talking about the fact. But definitely, we've been seeing that with the situation we've seen recently, so it has made the choice a little bit more difficult. It's not that obvious anymore that all of a sudden solar will replace coal. And why is that? Simply because up until now, we've been relying a lot on the market to help us to make the decision, on the economic factor to help us to make a decision. And as long as obviously coal remains very expensive and very dirty, it's another choice. When you're having gas, which is considered to be a transitional fuel, sort of taking over and going up, all of a sudden you will see renewables start to replacing gas because renewable, because it's cheap, tend to replace whatever is the most expensive fuel at that time. That's what, for me, definitely, if we want to make sure that we move toward energy transition, we also should be able to use policy because policy usually gives you a long-term view as to what is that we're looking to build here, where are we going. If you're simply going to rely on the volatility of the market, obviously you're going to find yourself in situations whereby you don't know where to go. Am I going to replace dirty coal? Am I going to replace costly gas, right? And if you rely only on the forces of the market will tell you you have to replace whatever is the most expensive fossil fuel source at the time. And at the moment, it happens to be that gas is the one. So that's what phasing down coal has posed, for example, in Europe and maybe in some other places. So policy is there to sort of bring the balance a little bit more. Hopefully that gives you some perspective. So that's the conversation I wanted us to have this evening. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Hopefully as well you've enjoyed looking at PV data and Kofi here. So Kofi here is a regular colleague that's popping in just to give us some more expertise because obviously I love his knowledge about solar, everything that he has, and also the fact that he's developed a tool that I believe is very, very useful for the whole of the industry. So I can't see any other question here, but I'm sure as soon as I get off this platform, I'll be seeing some. So thank you in advance for the question that you will send. We definitely do the best we can to respond to that. Make sure that you subscribe to all our channels. So we have YouTube, we have LinkedIn, we have Twitter, and we have Facebook. Also, make sure that you leave comment and you share this video and just let us know what is that you want us to talk about, right? And then we'll look at that, we see which one is relevant, and we tap into that. For the time being, so I have to say it's getting late and late in my time, so probably need to have a good rest. So as usual, it was a pleasure, a delight for me to talk to you. And then all I have to say, so I see you on Sunday, and may the sun be with you guys. Take care and bye-bye.